Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 3 of the LeanTossup College Football Betting Podcast. Uh, we're in week 3, and that was a hell of a week too. Um, I mean, I obviously I'll introduce my co-host here at BuckMetrics. I mean, obviously we bet our own picks. We don't tell you to bet picks and then not bet them. And wow, I don't think it is an understatement to say that was my best weekend ever of betting college football, uh, by a mile. How was it for you, Buck?
It was great. And aside from that, or in addition to that, I guess I'd say, just a lot of these other points that we made in the last pod, we just crushed too. I didn't have the guts to bet some of them, but you know what that means? We're gonna get absolutely punched in the face this week.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's a strong possibility, but I hope not though. But we'll have to see. But man, though, like Wisconsin and Texas A&M just we how we what spent 20 minutes ranting about
Yeah,
Wisconsin, both of them, like 20-minute rant about both of them, and they both lost as
yeah.
three score favorites. That was crazy.
Our podcast voodoo worked.
Yes. Well, let's see what we're going to talk about this week. So, I'll let you take it away with the executive dashboard.
All right, the executive dashboard. What just happened, where do we stand, and what happens next? So, first of all, looking back at the week that was, just revisiting some of the points that we made on last year's podcast, and just revisiting how those turned out. Um, One point I had made, Oklahoma State, I pointed out that they'd given up 546 yards and 44 points to Central Michigan, over 6 yards per play. Interesting, even though I believe they covered against Arizona State, they gave up just under 6 yards a play to Arizona State, and I think Arizona State is still a to be determined slash whatever team on offense. There might be some value against Oklahoma State's defense going forward, especially as they transition away from um, Jim Knowles to Derek Mason.
One quick point I want to make about Oklahoma State here. I was watching. I can't remember which game it was. It might have been like on. Oh, maybe it was like the halftime of the of the late games, and it was when they do the highlights from the earlier windows. And it was so funny because they did the highlight package for Oklahoma State, and the one commentator was like, "Oh yeah, Oklahoma State, a team no one talks about." And I'm like, "There's a reason why we don't talk about like this isn't like, oh man, we're just forget like they shouldn't be this highly ranked. There's
Hmm.
reasons why we're not like, oh man, Oklahoma State. Like no, there's reasons why. So yeah, this isn't. I don't think this is the week to bet against Oklahoma State. I don't think are they actually off this week. I think or maybe they're playing a D2. I don't see them on my on
Yeah,
the board
I
here,
think
but
I think
yeah,
there's more than average FCS FBS team games this week. A lot a
yeah,
lot of teams that just aren't on the board.
yeah. So Oklahoma, we will talk about Oklahoma State in the future. Just yeah, just we're bookmarking that. Unlike what the commentator says, we will talk about Oklahoma State in the future.
Okay. Next point. I had mentioned Toledo held Long Island U. Now it's Long Island U, but they held to 117 yards, which is ridiculous. They followed that up, holding UMass to just 253. I bring that up because before the season, I had mentioned that Toledo is going to be a very interesting team with a really good defense, and they've got that September 24th game at San Diego State, which is looming. Remember, I've been very bearish on San Diego State. They made me look pretty smart on that week one, and I've got my eyes squarely on that game coming up in week four. Next, Temple gained 179 yards at Duke. Basically, I said this might accelerate that whole determination of just how bad Temple could be. And my gosh, they were favored by only 14 over a Lafayette team that had beaten Sacred Heart 6-0. Um, yeah, Temple's going to be bottom five bad. Really, just a team to look to fade until the market just really grabs just how dire things are in Philadelphia. Next, we had referenced that Duke had opened at Northwestern, and that line was 6. It shot up to over 10 by close. And then when we were going through the QB plus, I was kind of surprised that Riley Leonard, the Duke quarterback, was fifth in my QB plus rankings. I said that opening number really showed that there's some belief in Duke, and they won straight up as a 10.5 dog, 10.5 point dog. Pardon me. Next, I had mentioned that in their first game as an FBS team, James Madison crushed Middle Tennessee State, who's, an okay Conference USA team. They just dominated them in yardage too. And what happened is James Madison crushed Norfolk State. Not the toughest opponent, but they just absolutely dominated them. In addition, three other teams from the Sun Belt East, they actually beat Power Five programs on the road. We'll get to that a little later. And Georgia State gave UNC all they wanted. I bring this up because this just reinforces that point I made before the season that the Sun Belt East is just a murderer's row. It's sneaky tough. I think at some point we might want to do a deeper dive once we have some mature information on the season about how does the Sun Belt East really stack up against some of the Power Five divisions. I am going to be interested once I have that information to see where they land. I don't think they'll be below all of them. I'll put it that way. I think there's some teams in the Midwest that have a much harder time throwing the ball than our friends in the Sun Belt East. Um, I had mentioned that I was concerned about Buffalo getting less than 300 yards at Maryland. I mentioned that I'm just not a believer in that coach, and they actually lost at home to Holy Cross. My goodness, no bueno on that. Mentioned that Charlotte that they had given up almost 560 yards to William and Mary, and said that that really showed that market's not really grabbing how bad Charlotte is. Um, Circa Open Maryland just giving only 23 at Charlotte. I said to play the first half, and they covered a line of 16 for the first half. Maryland did pretty easily. Another hashtag BBMI, brand based market inertia. Instant I pointed to last week was Colorado at Air Force. I don't think that the market was really grasping just how dire things are in Colorado, nor how good Air Force is. That opened it at 15, it closed at 17 and a half, and Air Force won by 31. Interestingly, Air Force is giving only 14 or 15, depending on where you shop, at Wyoming. Now, I know it's a road game, and Wyoming actually had a pretty decent week one or two, I forget. They beat Tulsa, I think it was. But I just think these are teams in a different direction. I'm looking very closely at Air Force. I don't think that number is going to go down, so I don't know if now is the time to strike, but
It,
definitely going to keep my eye on that one.
I've seen it move around a lot. I've actually already bet that one. So, but yeah, I don't. No, I mean, it's a late-ish game on Friday, 8 o'clock. But yeah, I like this Air Force team is really good. Like again, I mean, obviously, really good doesn't necessarily mean beat Wyoming by like a bit like, but you don't cover the 15 against Wyoming. But yeah, I'm in. I've got Air Force in this game. I think. Yeah, I'm on Air Force. I've got this is about a 15, 16 point spread, so I've got some slight value on Air Force here. But yeah, I'm on them.
Also in the Mountain West, I pointed out that when Circa opened Boise, giving only 15 New Mexico, that just showed me that Boise is not in a good spot. That would have opened at least a touchdown more a couple years ago. So if you had the patience and waited to the closing line, New Mexico actually covered the closing line of 17 and a half, and Boise just really screwed around a lot and made that a much more of a game than it should have been. But I think that's kind of what Boise is now. Next, I had mentioned that I was kind of aghast that Circa had opened Notre Dame, giving only 18 to Marshall. We know Notre Dame's defense is good, and they still were good, but it just showed an absolute disbelief in their offense. And my gosh, how correct was that? That was a rough watch, even for people like me who aren't huge Notre Dame fans, as I'm a USC guy. Um, their quarterbacking is horrible. They had three interceptions. They threw three interceptions. Pardon me. They had a total of all plays, not just passing, not just running, all plays, 4.7 yards per play at home. Um, for the game, their QB plus was 58. If you're still kind of new, 100 is average. 58 basically means you're about the worst in all of FBS across a whole season. So doing that against a Sun Belt team, I love the Sun Belt East, but that's a bad look for Notre Dame. They only ran for 3.5 per carry. Um, I just like to congratulate Notre Dame, since they were doing their victory dance about getting rid of that jerk Brian Kelly because he didn't make any friends. Well, guess what, guys? He didn't make friends, but he won games, and he was instrumental in not just coaching players but coaching coaches. And now you see there's a total void there. Nobody I'm thinking that basically he was responsible for whatever success Tommy Rees had because it's different now, guys.
It's yeah, I mean, on one hand, this is kind of interesting for me. I I don't completely blame Freeman yet. The thing of it is when you see the stat lines for the
Wait, who?
quarterback play,
You
it's
don't who did you
really bad.
who do you blame? Or who you don't
I
blame?
don't blame blame the head coach. I'm not blaming Freeman yet.
Oh, is
Um,
that Owen Freeman? Is that who you're
oh, and Freeman. No, I'm. Here's the thing. To be fair, I will. I've already bet on Cal this week. So full disclosure, I've
Oh,
already bet on Cal and Cal money line. So that's full disclosure. But I'm still not completely. I don't. I think some people are calling for Marcus Freeman's head. He's actually in the betting market. He's like I think the third or fourth favorite to
oh,
lose their job first. I know. That's the thing.
wow.
That's too high. Somehow you're getting 8-1 on Jeff Collins, which is kind of insane. As the next head coach to leave their job, that seems wrong. But no, I don't blame him yet. Like the thing is that defense was good. It shut down
Yeah,
Ohio State. That's not bad. And I mean, okay, yeah, you gave up some points to Marshall, but if you have three interceptions, you're gonna have stuff like that, right? And seven of those were again for a pick six. So well, six of those, yeah, seven of those were pick six. But it's the quarterback play. Tyler Buckner is horrible.
yeah,
I don't like. You look at the stat line for the QBs; it's really, really bad. And like,
yeah.
I mean, you go back with some of the Brian Kelly years, right? Like 2020, they had Ian Book. He's a Saint. He's a New Orleans Saint. He's actually started games in the NFL somehow. Um, you look at Jack Cohn or whatever. I think
Yeah,
he's a Ram. Like some of those guys have gotten into the NFL now. They're not start. Well, I mean, Ian Book started kind of randomly that he probably shouldn't have started, and they got crushed that game. So they kind of put that off to the side. But like he did start. Like you have to be at a level to get drafted in the NFL.
yeah.
Buckner is not that level. And I think there was some
No.
hype about him coming into this year. He's just been really, really bad. Like you can't complete like less than 50% of your passes. Like it's like, oh, he's a good running threat. Well, he's also kind of sucked at running. So, like, you can't have this. Like you have to have a better quarterback play. Like if you have better quarterback play, this offense can do its things. They also are really missing Kyron Williams. So I'm not calling for his head yet. Like I'm not I'm looking at like I didn't really watch that game because I didn't have anything on that game. But like I'm not. It's I'm not blaming. I'm not calling for Freeman's head yet. I'm not calling for his head. They could still lose this game to Cal 100%, but it's just because they don't have a good quarterback, and like that's not his
Yeah,
fault because he didn't technically recruit this class. Like I think this team is still good, but like we're not we're far ways from like both the pre Brian Kelly Notre Dame. I don't think because they've actually
yeah,
played two. Well, Marshall may not be that good, but like Cal will also be a relatively good team. Like they're not playing like nobody's here. They're not playing FCS teams. So
yeah. Um, I can't say I fully expected it to be this bad, but I remember when I was chatting with our friend Dylan at Four Horsemen, I said, there's a problem here in that you've got a first time head coach who's a defensive guy, and your offensive coordinators basically, he started shaving 2 years ago. Um, there's a void there, and they need to have some older experienced guys, and they never fixed that. And you're seeing that now. Now, I didn't expect it to be that bad as we're seeing now. Um, you know, for some really horrifying context, from a USC fan's perspective, it, Notre Dame probably has the worst quarterbacking of any team that we'll face this year, other than Rice. That says a lot. We're in the Pac-12. We're not in the SEC. um, that's they're in a pretty quickly in a rough spot. And then to your point, you said that you took Cal. The fact that that Notre Dame was opened, giving just 11 to Cal, who was kind of life and death against UNLV at home. You know, the market's telling me there's still problems with this offense. It's not going to be fixed.
it's already down to 10.5.
Yeah, makes sense. Next, I gave out a couple of games that I thought were indicative in terms of two teams that had been kind of left for dead and have really been coming back to life. UNLV getting 13 at Cal and Kansas getting 14 at West Virginia. UNLV, as I mentioned, covered at Cal, and Kansas actually won straight up. Kansas actually did USC a little bit of an obscure favor. We held solely a record for the largest overtime margin of loss. 1996, we lost to Arizona State by 13, and that was equaled on on a overtime touchdown without the point after. So thank you, Kansas, Lance Leipold. And we'll talk about him in a little bit in terms of where he's going to wind up later. Um, Also, when I did my USC update, I said 8.5 was a great line on USC. I took that. That was my biggest bet of the week, and that covered easily, but not easily. It was kind of weird. It was very much in hand until the very very end, and then Stanford, God bless David Shaw, he got Clay Helton fired, and then he just said, you know what? I don't care about people that bet on Stanford. I'm just going to take a knee here. I'm not going to try to cover late. Um, Thank you, David Shaw. As you mentioned, we talked about Texas A&M and Wisconsin having these fraudulent big week one dominant wins. They both lost. They both lost at home straight up as 17-point plus favorites. Um, Probably our best work last week in a really good week. Uh, you know, to be fully fair, we both liked Alabama giving 20 at Texas. We both whiffed big time on that. Tennessee, I like them giving 5 at Pitt. I think that still closes below a touchdown. I can't really count that as a win because it went to overtime. And yet it only went to overtime because of some classic Pat Narduzzi end of the first half mastery that just gave Tennessee a gift touchdown they shouldn't have had. So I'm counting that as a win just because of the way it went to a tie. Um, we both like UAB giving less than a touchdown at Liberty. We were wrong on that. And then I didn't really have this. You like BYU giving 2.5. I think you actually had him giving 3 when we did the pod um, to Baylor.
Yeah, I didn't have the 2.5, so I was feeling a lot better towards the end of the game, but BYU decided to keep missing field goals. So, and then they went to overtime, and then Baylor, I don't know what the hell they were doing. They just kept running the ball. I'm like, okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Like they just I think they had to go for it on fourth down to try to tie the game in OT, but they just couldn't do it. So, yeah, it was a hell of a sweat though. But yeah, that was that BYU was the right side, but it was close. It was not that close. It was pretty close.
That was a fun game to watch too.
Hmm.
Um, Good nightcap game.
Yeah.
All right. So next window on the executive dashboard, informing the narrative. These are just other events that confirm or rebut narratives that we already had coming into the week. I thought it was interesting. Oklahoma had only 33 versus Kent State. Um, and for context, I don't like to play comparative scores, but it's just interesting that actually Washington actually had more points in Kalen DeBoer's very first game at Washington against Kent State. Kind of a little bit of a fraudulent dominance game here too. They only had 130 yards against Kent State, less than 4 yards a carry. Maybe a little grain of salt because Kent State got a new defensive coordinator. They really needed to fix that. Don't know if they fixed it or if this is just a reflection on Oklahoma. I bring this up because to me, this makes the Oklahoma Nebraska game even more unbettable. You have just who knows what's going to happen in Nebraska. Now you've got, okay, on Oklahoma's side, we know their defense will be great. But this just makes me wonder, what are they, just a half team? What are we going to get there from their offense? And I'm staying well clear of that Oklahoma Nebraska game.
I think I unfortunately bet that before Scott Frost was fired, but oh well. I'm,
Wow.
I'm riding with the minus 13.5. So
Itchy trigger finger on your end if you're
I mean, here's the thing. It was 13.5. I'm like, if Scott Frost is coaching, this is bad, and then he's not coaching. I'm like, oh crap. It's like
yeah.
it's. I mean, we'll see. I'm not like. Again, I didn't. They didn't bet the house on it or anything. A small amount, but yeah, I'll like. If I lose it, I'll live. But like, yeah. I mean, I. The question about this game for me is going to be, and we'll probably talk about Nebraska later, but like, what chaotic state of the program are they going to be in? Like, okay, they took out Scott Frost. Like, we have no idea who the new head coach is going to be. Who's the interim? Is it Whipple? I guess it's going to be him by seniority,
It's
competence.
Mickey Joseph actually.
Oh, really? Who's he?
He was a longtime LSU assistant. This is interesting. I think his college career ended on a really late hit against Oklahoma he played for Nebraska
Oh, okay.
long ago.
I'm noticing a theme with Nebraska hires.
Yeah. I guess some context that's kind of interesting, or it makes sense to me, is when you've got these in-season firings, what can happen. Um, I'll put it in USC terms. In 2013, they fired Lane Kiffin, and that became a really fun team. That team actually beat a top 5 Stanford team at the end of the year. They actually dominated pretty much through the end of that year. 2015, when Sark got fired, in Clay Helton's second game, he actually beat number 3 Utah pretty handily at home. On the other hand, we have last season where they fire Clay Helton and that just turned a bad situation even worse somehow. So to your point, what are we going to get? You can get anything. That's why
Yeah.
this game is just not touchable for
To
me.
add to your list last year, there's that they fired. Well, they had to fire their head coach midway through the season with Washington State, and they actually won a bowl. Or no, they made it to a bowl game. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out. Like, I mean, the team is there's still some talent on the team. I just don't know how quickly you're going to be able to pull that together in time to play a top 10. Call it, I think they actually are top 10, but call it top 10 team in Oklahoma.
Hmm.
Like, that seems not fun. And the thing of it is, like, okay, like, there's more than just, like, yes, it was Scott Frost, and I think there's a couple other problems. I think a new head coach could fix some of those, but, like, I don't know how prepared this team is going to be. Like, that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
I kind of think Oklahoma can just roll over them, and we'll see. But I don't know. I'm holding. But I'm not touching anything else on this game though. I'm done for now.
Okay. Um, what else was interesting was Louisville actually beat UCF on the road 20-14. And I bring that up because Louisville might not be as hopeless as they looked in week one. And this actually makes me think about Syracuse. We'll get to Syracuse a little later, but um, I think there's some hope for Syracuse. Um,
Yeah, I actually on a kind of a whim, I was thinking the same thing, and I actually bet Syracuse to cover versus UConn, and they covered very handily. So because
yeah.
it was a basically carryover bet. I'm like, I don't think I don't think Louisville was as bad as they were last week, so I bet Louisville spread money line on Friday, and it won. I'm like, oh, well, if Louisville isn't that bad, is Syracuse actually good? So then they can cover the 23-point spread against UConn. So I bet that, and then you roll down the hill, right? You're just like, this is progressively how it goes, right? So yeah, well, yeah, well, Syracuse is fascinating. I think this team might actually be good based off of my kind of weird triangulations, but I think the Syracuse team might actually be good. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, this might have been the play for that just grab a team deep down the ACC that I did. Maybe I had the right notion, but the wrong team. So they're actually basically just about even with Purdue. That might be an interesting deeper dive next week, especially if they beat Purdue. Is like, what the heck went right here? Because I'm really glad about ripping on people, and this might be a like a hey, let's see if there were like any signs that we could have picked up on this one. Also interesting, Clemson has yet to have over 400 yards of offense in either of their games against bad Georgia Tech and FCS Furman. I don't think this week's game is bettable. I can't remember where they play, or else I would have mentioned it here. But I've got my eye on the Clemson offense again.
They're against LA Tech.
Okay, yeah, that's re, yeah, that's a rebuild mode.
It's like
I
30. It's 34 points though.
Yeah, LA Louisiana Tech's going to be just good on offense. They don't have the defense to stay with them. Um, Speaking of Georgia Tech, Jeff Sims, a QB plus of 29 in a win over Western Carolina, an FCS team. Um, I think there's probably going to still be some value to going against Georgia Tech going forward. I think that just the depths of just how bad they are is probably not baked into the market yet. And then a couple of interesting zigs and then zags. Anthony Richardson, he had that really nice performance against Utah, a very good defense, a QB plus of 103. QB plus of -16 against a very good Kentucky defense. And then Mike Wright of Vanderbilt, he looked really good at Hawaii. He had a QB plus of 103 and not quite as good with a QB plus of -69 against Wake Forest. So I think you've got like two talented guys that are getting by at times on their athleticism. And I think you're going to see not variances crazy like this, but it just informs a narrative that like these guys that are athletes and can just kind of hit the eject button, they're going to just have a lot more variance than just the the more just kind of like go through progressions and take your lumps.
Yeah. The thing is, Richardson only had like 6 rushing yards against Kentucky,
Yeah.
which was brutal. And the thing of it is, and I said this last week, he needed to evolve more as a pocket passer. Like, great, you can run for a ton of yards. That's great. You gotta be able to pass the ball, and he was just not able to. There was a brutal pick six in that game that really cost them the game. And I said like like last week I said danger. This is problem. Don't bet on Florida here. And I didn't touch it. And sure enough, yeah, like it's just you see it if you follow Florida, this happens every year. They open as a favorite against Kentucky and then they lose. It's hilarious, and like I'm a little concerned about Anthony Richardson here. He needs to get better as a passer, and he's not there yet. But I think maybe next year he can, or maybe towards the end of the season. But yeah, this Kentucky team might actually be kind of legit. Kentucky and
Yeah,
Arkansas, they're not bad. They're actually pretty good. I think we don't get to see Arkansas this week again, but they really dominated South Carolina. Which again, to be fair, it is South Carolina. But like we're looking at that Alabama team that was stopped by Texas's defense. I think they play in a couple weeks. I'm not like I'm gonna look at that Arkansas number when we see it. Like that's a number I'm gonna look really hard at when I first see that number, and I'm gonna think about
mm,
that because if there's a team to take down Alabama this year, I think it might be Arkansas. KJ Jefferson is actually legit, and I think he might be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. So
yeah, yeah. I was just looking up too. So Anthony Richardson had only 64 pass attempts in his career coming into the season. So he's going to progress. He's got the right coach. I don't think people just kind of look at Napier and they look at Louisiana's one loss and said, yeah, he did a good job, but he did a really good job with the quarterback that he had there too. He just every year his QB plus is going up like 20 points each year. So he's going to bring Richardson along. It's just, it's so early. And especially if you're that athletic, like I said, it's going to take some time, but
next
the
year,
cool,
next
the,
year when all of Georgia's defense is in the NFL, watch out
well,
for Florida.
and I think those kind of guys are. We were just talking about the stock market before we started here. Those could be the ones to really bet on when the market's totally just like given up and just said, "Yep, I'm dumping all my Anthony Richardson." Buy it at 10 cents on the dollar. Then, all right. So next window in the executive dashboard, market intelligence. So these are the circa opening lines, and I'm sure some of these have moved since, if not quite a bit. Just what I'm seeing, what they're informing. First thing that stuck out to me: Penn State giving 3 at Auburn with a total of 47.5. What is this telling me? Um, don't believe in the week 1 and week 2 Sean Clifford that you've seen. It's gonna come back to normal real quick here. Um, do they win? Yeah, maybe probably, but it's not going to be a 5 touchdown performance by Sean Clifford. Um, I don't know if you feel differently about that.
I I can't believe I'm saying this, but I've bet on Penn State. I can't believe it. I know
Well,
it's me, right? I can't believe I bet Penn State here. I don't know why. I don't think this Auburn team is really good. Like this is not necessarily a
yeah.
bet on. Like here's the thing. I'm betting Penn State this week. Will I ever bet them again for the season? Probably not. But like I just think this line is a little short, and I think like here's the thing. And this is scary. This is like of all. I mean, I bet Nebraska. Like, I bet Oklahoma against Nebraska. This is the one I'm most concerned about because like anything like it feels like. And here's the thing. Usually when you see a -3, it's like a very defined one in the market. But like you're looking at a -3 and like a 47. I feel like this is the market saying anything could happen in this game. We have no idea. Like I feel like they're just saying we have no idea. And I'll just take Penn State. I don't know. I'll take Penn State, but I'm not loving it. I'm just like whatever, just Penn State.
Yeah, well, Auburn struggled with San Jose State too. I I think that literally Clifford costs them like maybe I would peg them 10 to 12 spots higher just in my team rankings if they had Aller starting at quarterback, but they've got good talent pretty much everywhere else. It's just a matter of the quarterback play. So I think you're okay in Penn State, given just a field goal. Um, Next one, Michigan State at Washington -2. Interesting because I bring this up because I think the look ahead in the summer wasn't Michigan State giving like 5 or so in this one.
Yeah, I have no idea why this line is Michigan State +2. I took Michigan State already. I have no idea why this line is this. I got nothing. I don't understand this line at all. I think it's because Washington looked good over, and it's Michael Penix Jr. is
Yeah.
Washington's QB. I think they look good over a win against the D2 team, but like, and I think Michigan State struggled a little bit. They did cover the spread against Western Michigan, but like Western Michigan isn't a bad MAC team, so I don't know. I'm excited to see this game actually. I'm on Michigan State in this game. I don't think Washington deserves a -2 in this. I'll take Michigan as a dog all day.
It's interesting and it kind of lines up with obviously you said it looks like Washington's offense might have gotten the hang of things really quickly. They scored 45, like I said, against Kent State at home. Um, and Michigan State was actually one of the luckiest teams last year too. So maybe there's a little bit of a realization of that coming in as well. Don't know, but it was interesting that there's been like a touchdown plus move in that line. Um, Old Dominion at Virginia minus 12. This is interesting in that Old Dominion beat Virginia Tech at home. Now they're on the road. Virginia didn't really strike me as being capable of much anything. I know that you can improve early in a coach's tenure, but I'm very, very, very concerned that Brendan Armstrong basically led his team to 3 points. Maybe Illinois' got a really good defense, but
They don't. We've seen their games.
okay, but yeah, okay, maybe if they're great by Illinois standards, still you got to score more than 3 points if you're Brendan Armstrong. So I'm when I looked at the returning metrics, I thought that it was a complete rebuild around Armstrong, and that's kind of my fear. So what's interesting is I'm kind of having a hard time reconciling Virginia giving 12 when they've looked so inept, and Old Dominion has not looked great, but they did pull off an upset. They didn't look great against Virginia Tech, but they did do it, and they weren't like blown off the field. So I'm not going to bet Old Dominion. I've got enough riding on them on the season total bet, but this is interesting. I think if anything, I, maybe just a small Old Dominion money line play again. Just run the same gag again. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm good with that. I got Old Dominion here. The thing of it is that Virginia performance was really bad, like
Yeah.
really really bad against Illinois, and Old Dominion is like not bad. Like the yes, they didn't cover the spread against East Carolina, but that's a little deceptive. Like that, like they were not blown out in that game. They had I think it was like a pick six or like a like a bad return on something like a interception return, but no, like they were not blown out of that game. That game was a lot closer than the scoreline appears to be. Like they were competitive, and yeah, they actually looked better in that loss than they did against Virginia Tech. So if they're improving and Virginia's getting blown out by Illinois, that was I saw some of that game. That was really bad. Yeah, give me the Monarchs.
Okay. Next interesting line was North Texas at UNLV opened a total of 54.5, and just a reminder that the average actual total for a FBS game is 56. And I bring this up because this kind of confirms to me that UNLV has gotten out of just that area of just horrible, horrible, horrible defenses. I'm not saying that North Texas has a great offense, but they actually did look very competent against UTEP. They got crushed by SMU, which they kind of do for a lifestyle. But I think that the fact that UNLV game is under 54.5 against a competent offense shows me that they might they might actually have a team on to some degree on both sides of the ball. And we are UNLV podcast, as you pointed out a couple times. um, Go ahead.
We are, yeah, we are UNLV podcast. Yeah, I think they could do well in this game. I actually do have them as a bit of a favorite. What's the line?
I think that's swung on both sides. I think they're like a 3-point favorite now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I think like North Texas isn't bad. Yeah, they are a 3-point favorite. Oh, that total's up to 62 now. Wow,
Really?
that total blew up there.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm a believer in UNLV. So yeah, let's go.
Okay, and next one, Georgia Southern is getting 13 at UAB. Just for reference, Conference USA, I think everybody would have them as a lesser conference in the Sun Belt, especially the Sun Belt East. I bring this up because I think Georgia Southern is just being recognized as just another team that beat Scott Frost in a one-score game, and not anybody that's going to do any damage in the Sun Belt East. If you're getting 13, you know, at Birmingham, I don't like your chances when you're playing just the murderer's row of the Sun Belt East.
I'll just say this: I'm not touching this game. UAB looked pretty bad last week. This is like again, this would be a classic Georgia Southern uh, letdown game. Like, oh, we took down Nebraska. And it's like, so this is just this could go anyway. Like this negative 13, the UAB could win by 40. Georgia Southern could win by 5. So no, I'm not touching this.
I'm with you on that. And then lastly, UTEP giving only 4 at New Mexico. This is telling me my UTEP bet might be in serious trouble.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm thinking the same thing.
they did turn things around really quickly, and New Mexico's got a couple of really good defensive minds. So I don't know if this is a spot to do it, but this is going to be the acid test for what the Miners are this year.
It was last week was a little scary because I think what was the line for the UTEP game last week was like they were like something crazy like what was like -21 against New Mexico State or something. What was
I
the
think it was
line?
like I think it was like 13. It got bet down to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
some big score, and I had it a lot closer. I had it, like within a touchdown, and I'm like, uh-oh. And then I was like, I'm not touching this. I have them because of my the futures bet, so I'm gonna leave this alone. We need a UTEP win here, and they won, but it was about what my model had. I'm like, uh-oh.
yeah. It was
And
like a one-score game, I believe.
yeah, and I have them as dogs to New Mexico, so that's not good. So
Oh boy. Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
let's uh let's not talk about this game anymore.
Okay. Um. All right. Next window in the dashboard. Hashtag BBMI, brand-based market inertia, where I just think the market's not really grabbing on to what a team is and really sticking to their brand instead. Based on these, again, these are based on the circa opening lines. Minnesota only giving 23 to Colorado just stunk out loud. That
That's
was way
20
short.
28
That's
now.
Yeah, that seems more like it. Um, I think the lesson is unless, well, I'll put it this way. Until we see the opening lines move, I'm just going to keep a really close eye on anything that opens Colorado to see if the market adjusts. Also interesting that Minnesota seems really undervalued there too. You know, you and we were kind of at the end of the Big Ten West podcast preseason, going between Minnesota and Purdue, and I think I landed on Minnesota. I don't remember if you landed on Minnesota
I'm
or
on
Purdue.
Minnesota too, so I'm very
Yeah,
happy with where I ended up. Um,
yeah. So I think the market's maybe not catching up to exactly what this team is going to be.
I think Minnesota is the best team in the Big Ten West, and there's not a lot of competition there. We'll
Yeah,
talk more about some other teams in the Big Ten West later. Um, but wow, yeah, that it's like literally like Minnesota's just chugging along, and I'd say like doing like a good season, but like not like not an amazing season. And just you've got Wisconsin and Iowa just collapsing around you. It's just like it's the only one left. Like everybody's just collapsing, and Minnesota's just like, yep, we're just gonna keep running the ball and.
yeah. It's so I used to a lady that used to work for me. She's goofy. She never really had great jobs, and then one time she just told me, I've got $400,000 in my retirement. I was like, where did you what? All of a sudden out of nowhere. How'd you get that? And I bring that up because I think Minnesota all of a sudden they're going to be like 8-0. People are going to be like, Minnesota's 8-0.
Yeah,
This is going to be the same thing. Where did that come from? Very sneaky. I don't, they don't have like a big dog that are going to take down. I think their toughest games are later in the season, so they could sneak up on a lot of people
as
this,
you'd be like
this
12 and
season.
0 Minnesota in the Big Ten title game against like
Yeah, I
11
don't
and
know.
1
At
Ohio
some point
State.
they're gonna play one of those rock fight big test win games. It's gonna be unkind to them, but I think they're on their
If
way to being what we thought they are.
yeah, if Wisconsin is giving them points, like just
Oh yeah.
immediately betting, like I don't even
Yep.
care. I
Yeah.
don't care.
Yep.
I don't think they will, but like if they are, just like immediately like do that, and then immediately also bet Graham Mertz interception. That's also fun.
Well, that's just kind of a given. Um, okay. Rutgers giving 16 at Temple. Um, Again, Temple is just the team to fade until the market's getting it. Now, this is interesting. I only see on the Action Network, I see that only two books are taking action on this game right now. So that makes me think there's probably a injury issue at Rutgers quarterback. Is that possible? Do we have any news on that?
I don't know about that. But when I ran this, I have Rutgers -24. So,
Yeah.
but if there is an injury, a quarterback or something, or I don't know, but there's if that's the line, there's value on Rutgers. I'm seeing 17.5 on my book right now. So
Yeah, I'm just checking right now, and my browser is not great. I don't know if I bet that. I think I was looking for that. I mean, that's just a god. You have to play that. Yeah.
you do, but at the
Given
same time, though, it's like it's Rutgers. Like the thing of it is, if Rutgers just like wins this like 17-0, you're gonna be like, damn. Like you're just, well, actually you cover the 16, but like you're just gonna feel so stupid if like the Rutgers just does Rutgers things, right? Like that's the
uh,
problem.
I'll push back on that. Didn't they score 22 at Boston College?
Yeah,
And Hafley's a good defensive coordinator. They have serious obvious problems on offense. Um, but I think that, you know, Rutgers might not be as horrible as we think on offense. I mean, that's really just damning them weak weak praise, but I think that they're not as just inept as people think. They've outscored two teams 88-28. I mean, they beat Wagner. Okay, 22-21 at Boston College. Um, and Boston College had Jerkovich back too, so um, yeah, I don't think Temple scores again. Temple scored, I think, 17 against Lafayette. So,
No
um,
points. They just get shut out again because they got shut out against Duke, right? I think it was 30. It was 34-0. I think
yeah,
so.
yeah,
They could just get shut out again. Yeah.
yeah. Vanderbilt giving one at Northern Illinois. I bring this up because I think the Northern Illinois narrative is starting to turn. Northern Illinois struggled to run against Tulsa, and they're a running team. I've Vanderbilt's kind of a wild card with just as as emblematic from their quarterback play of Mike Wright, where I said he went from 103 QB plus to negative 14 or whatever it was. I'm not sure if we know we're getting there, but I think that Northern Illinois is going to see that luck run out that they had from last season in week one of this season. Um, Air Force giving 14 Wyoming. We talked about that. I think that the 14 was short. That's up to like 17 now. We said right.
I think it's 15. Yeah, 15.
Okay. Yeah, I have to bet that then. Um, then this is interesting. Charlotte at Georgia State minus 19 and a half. I just brought up Charlotte in the recap of week one about
Just
Marcus
how
not
bad they
getting.
were.
Yeah, just they don't have a defense. And Georgia State is, home of the biggest, baddest division in the group of five, the Sun Belt East. Um, what is this game at? Is this still under 20?
Let's see.
Yeah, it is. I don't get that. Um, it's at Georgia State. So I
Wow,
don't,
that's
yeah.
tempting. What do I have that at?
Yeah, I got that at 19, actually. I actually grabbed some of that.
I got 19 too on my
Yeah.
book. Let's see. I'll find what the model has for it. Ooh, okay. Yeah, the model seems to be off there. The model's like really loving Charlotte for some reason, but that's probably a bug. So don't trust that. Sometimes the model is wrong.
All right. So that's the BBMI for this week. Um, just some stat nerd stuff. Just using my metrics. My top QB plus is not going to rattle off the top five like I did last week. Just go for some interesting names, the top and bottom of the list. Number two in FBS for QB plus, Garrett Schrader of Syracuse, candidate for a deeper dive. Interesting. I have Purdue over 7 wins, and I'm not really liking their chances of winning at Syracuse, and that guy's putting that bet a little bit of jeopardy right now. Number three, Dylan Gabriel at Oklahoma makes sense. Just interesting. That's in line with kind of about as good as we could expect him to do. Number five, Riley Leonard of Duke, still staying in the top 10 there at number five for our quarterbacks. Number seven, Kevin Slovis of Pitt actually, took a step back, which was interesting against Tennessee. So that kind of informs me that Tennessee has stepped up their defense a bit from last year too, which was a really big problem for them last year. Slovis slid a little bit, and he, not surprisingly, got hurt. So we'll see how long he's going to be out. Number 10, Quinn Ewers. As much as I like to rip on Texas and Sark, my gosh, he looked good while he was in there against Alabama. That is rough that he's out. And I think he's going to be out, I've heard, anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. And probably one to keep an eye on until he's back in. I don't know what we have with Hudson Card. He was gutsy. I don't know if he was really good on, to his credit, he was basically playing quarterback on a pogo stick as he just had one functional limb. Um, but I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on in terms of like maybe betting against Texas going forward. Number 12, Davis Brin of Tulsa. Interesting. This name kind of came out of nowhere for me, and I'm going to keep an eye on Tulsa. This is interesting that They've kind of got by on their defense for a while. And as a reminder, their head coach Philip Montgomery is Art Briles' disciple. So maybe they've kind of got some offense finally figured out there in Tulsa. 13, Michael Penix. We had talked about how he's been really strong to start the season. Then going down towards the bottom, number 93. This is out of 100 qualifiers. Donovan Smith of Texas Tech. I bring this up because I'd like Texas Tech coming in. They had a gutsy win against Houston, but he's number 93. And one reason I like Texas Tech, aside from their coaching staff, was Tyler Shuck. I think it was totally overlooked as a returning quarterback in the Big 12. They might be in a tough spot without Shuck if Donovan Smith is the guy. Now, Houston has a good defense, and maybe this is just a one-game anomaly that dropped them way down this far, but um, going to look for Donovan Smith to have a better effort real soon, or else Texas Tech might be a team that I can't bet on. 94, 94 Brady Cook of Missouri. Uh, this is interesting because Eli Drinkwitz chased off Connor Bazelak to Indiana, and he's got the same quarterback with the same quarterback problems, which makes me think that it's not a quarterback problem, it's a coach problem. And number 97, Grant Wells of Virginia Tech. This is interesting because he made the jump from Conference USA last season to the ACC at Virginia Tech this season, and I think he just might not be ready for ball at this level of play. Virginia Tech does not play an FBS team this week, so I'm not betting against them, but I've definitely got my eye as a bet against going forward. The top receivers. So these are the most productive receivers based on yards, and yards is relation to number of catches. Number one, this is interesting. Allie Jennings, the third from Old Dominion. Um, Interesting because their head coach Ricky Ronnie was the offensive coordinator for Penn State, so maybe they've got some kind of semblance of offense falling into place. I talked about there at Virginia. This is maybe another data point that's going to make me push me at least just a little money line on the Monarchs. I know that you were encouraged by them. Number two receiver in all of FBS, Kalen Stokes from Tulsa. Going with Davis Brin as a top 12 quarterback, you know, this shows to good quarterback play and an explosive receiver. Definitely going to keep my eye on Tulsa for spots to play, maybe overs, but definitely looking for teams that just can't keep up with them. Number 5 receiver, Torrey Horton from Colorado State. Interesting because Colorado State has struggled this year, but they're trying to bring the air raid from Nevada to Colorado State, the coaching staff, and Horton actually was one of those 12 or 13 guys that took the bus from Reno to Colorado Springs, or sorry, to Fort Collins, and I'm going to look for at some point this season for the offense to really just kind of snap into place. And the fact they already have a receiver in the top 5 of most efficient / explosive is really encouraging. So keeping an eye on Colorado State going forward. Then a couple of other names that are interesting. Number 15 and number 18, Jalen Calhoun and Eli Pancol are both from Duke. Really not what we expected when they brought in Mike Elko. I don't know really anything about their offensive coordinator, but this is going to deserve a deeper dive. Sure, they beat up on Temple, but they actually, it's fair to say Northwestern has at least a reasonable power 5 defense. And, Duke gave them all they could handle on the offensive end, which was surprising. So, gonna look a little deeper into what's going on with the Duke offense. It's pretty interesting. Next window in the executive dashboard, the USC update. Surprise, surprise. My top-rated quarterback in all of FBS by QB Plus is Caleb Williams. He's just looked absolutely tremendous.
Just a quick note on that.
Yeah.
He is not the favorite for Heisman right now.
Uh,
I can't believe it.
I can believe it. I mean, their defense is going to cost them a couple of games at some point.
Yeah, but like we just saw Bryce Young not have a really bad game against Texas, and CJ Stroud had a bad game
Yeah.
against Notre Dame. I think Williams should be the favorite. I took a stack at that at plus 400. My other books had it at 300. My book had it at 400, so I took that. But yeah, I mean, I think there's value there. Will he win it or not? I don't know, but I'd much rather be holding a Caleb Williams ticket right now than a CJ Stroud ticket or a Bryce Young ticket.
Yeah, very fair. And to that point, he has the number 8 receiver, Jordan Addison, that he's throwing to. And Addison kind of had a whatever first game against Rice, but boy, he was really, really good against Stanford. If you saw that Stanford game, it was interesting. The first half was basically full of plays. There were like a dozen plays where I literally had to rewind because I just, you just had to look and just say, how did this guy get so open? How is this spot so open that somebody can just run to it and there's just nobody around him? And you just didn't have that off after halftime. They said they didn't execute or whatever. I think they just ran more vanilla stuff after halftime and just said, look, let's just not lose the game here. And it seems that Riley just kind of once he gets to a certain number of points, just wants to keep a lot of those, gotcha plays in his back pocket for later, not unveil them all. Also, the offense now for the second time in 2 games, they had no turnovers, and that only happened 4 times in the 3 preceding seasons, which is very encouraging because that had really bitten them, in the past from time to time. The pass defense, if we go by the QB plus allowed for USC, is number 7 in all of FBS, and actually that is the top of any team that's played 2 or more games against FBS opponents. One thing that's still driving that is the interceptions. They've intercepted 6 passes, but if we get rid of all the interceptions for all the teams and just recalculate, they still rank 28th, which is way, way, way ahead of where they were last season. They have some issues on defense. I think it's a lot more in the run game. But even then, the defense is 51st in yards per play, not adjusted for any kind of strength of opponent. So, Rice is not the best opponent, but Stanford, I think, is going to be okay. Interesting too that the defense was faced with this crazy David Shaw magic trick where he just out of nowhere just says, "Hey, we're going to run the mesh now." And I wouldn't even have if you gave me like 20 crazy scenarios to guess about what David Shaw is going to do, I would have never guessed that. So they really struggled with that. They made some adjustments to where it was more of a back and forth where they would stop, and then Stanford would get a huge run. So at least they made some adjustments that were promising. The defense is going to really going to determine how far this team can go. The offense is going to be able to score with anybody but the elite offenses, and even then it'll be kind of interesting. This week they're giving, I think they opened 12.5 to Fresno. Does that seem to still be what the price is on them?
This is a late game. It's 10:30 game. It's 12 right
Yeah.
now. Um, I have it closer than that. I have it within a score, which is a little concerning.
Yep.
I think you take the points. The thing of it is, like, on one hand, USC is really looking good. Like, they are looking like, I mean, for some reason they're not they're favorites to win the Pac-12, but it's like plus 137 to win the Pac-12, which seems insane. Um, and like this is seeming to be a lot more of the USC of old. Like you used to look at like the score line on a Saturday night and you'd see like, oh, USC put up 50 or USC put up 44.
Yeah.
In recent years, you didn't have that anymore.
No.
But we're starting to get back to that, and that's kind of cool as a sign for college football. But yeah, there is still ways to go, and you mentioned it earlier, right? Like we both had USC minus the points. I think minus 9.5. And yeah, it wasn't a particularly stressful cover, but had Stanford really put their foot on, like at a certain point, USC just kind of like whatever, screw it. I think they ended up winning by like 21, I think, or was it 14?
13. 13.
13. Yeah, so if Stanford had done stuff, they could have gotten a backdoor cover on it, which is a little concerning. Um, but I think, and Fresno did lose to Oregon State, but that was really close. Both teams
Yeah.
went down the field, got field. I was watching that game. That was the other game, as alongside Baylor for me. So I didn't want to touch that game because I had it exactly. I had it as a pick as well, and that's where it is now. But I actually think Fresno State's pretty good, and they have been looking ahead to USC, and that's why they lost to Oregon State. Yeah. Also, could Oregon State actually just be pretty good? And I kind of think Oregon State's
They
actually
are.
not bad. Yeah, I think they're actually
Yeah.
a pretty good team. So yeah, but actually, what's Oregon's odds? Not Oregon? What's Oregon State's odds to win the Pac-12? That might not be actually a bad idea.
No, I think that's a very valid bet.
What are they? Do we have Pac-12 championship? Yeah. Oregon State 16-1. That's not bad at
Yeah.
all.
No. No.
Like they're
They're
actually pretty good. Like they're like again, I think they take down Oregon in this in the rivalry game at the end of the year. I think we're talking about Oregon in a little bit. But yeah, I this you like I don't think this Fresno State team's that bad.
No.
As a side, my book is giving me a boosted Air Force to win the Mountain West at plus 400, and I'd bet more of it if I wasn't more concerned about Fresno, because that's the problem, right? To win, you have to get
Yeah.
past Fresno, so it
Yeah.
doesn't matter how much good value you get on Air Force if they lose the conference championship game, right? That's the problem.
Yeah.
So
That
I don't
was that was the approach I was taking. Just to go back to when we were talking about that, I was going to bet them both because they both opened like about plus 450 or
know.
so.
Hmm.
And when I got to Vegas, Fresno was down to like 250.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, the thing about going back to this game, I made this 8, so I'm definitely not giving 12. Fresno's tough because they have Jake Hayner and Jeff Tedford, so I think they can definitely trade punches with USC for all 60 minutes. I think it just might come down to, can USC force turnovers, and I don't like to give 12 and a half more than one score if that's what I'm relying on. All right, future bets. Future bets that I'm happy about and what I'm not happy about. So South Alabama over 6 wins. They opened getting only 14 at UCLA, which I don't think anybody had that being that close before the season. After they beat Central Michigan by 14 on the road, they actually held Central Michigan to 24, whereas Oklahoma State gave up 44 to Michigan or Central Michigan at home. Um, they have the Eastern Michigan transfer quarterback, and his QB plus is 152 so far, and they're in the easier division of the Sun Belt. So I'm liking both my over and that bet to win the Sun Belt. Basically, is coming down to just don't screw up and get some good luck in the championship game. Don't know if we can hedge it, but let's see. Wisconsin under 9 wins, just because that Washington State game fell exactly as to how we had predicted it, not just last week, but remember in the preseason outlook when I was talking about Washington State, I didn't say I was going to bet them over, but we both said it's going to be an interesting, fun team to watch, and I actually said this is a spot where Washington State could definitely upset Wisconsin. And it happened, and it's interesting because the reason it happened, where you've got a good defense and a good defensive coordinator that just overwhelmed a really bad Wisconsin quarterback, I can see that happening again against Northwestern, against Illinois, against Iowa, against Minnesota, against Ohio State. They can only lose 2 more before you're getting to just a push at 9.
Yeah, that Wisconsin game was interesting. Washington State's offense wasn't spectacular in the game. It was pretty good.
No,
They did win the game, but yeah, no, they completely shut down Wisconsin on offense. Like there's so many times when like Washington State would throw a pick and then Wisconsin would get the ball back, and then like minutes, like basically one or two, like they'd only get like one first down if even, and then they just get the ball back, and like it, like usually when you like when in college, right? Usually you're not going like 15 yards in a drive or going 30, 40. It'd be like, yep, you got 12 yards in this drive. You're giving the ball back now, and like it was crazy how effective they were, just completely and again Wisconsin, it's a good running team. Their quarterback, like their running back was pretty good, but Graham Mertz not good at all. And it was so funny because I was watching that game with the audio on, and at halftime, the people at the desk, they praised Graham Mertz, like, oh, he's leading his team. It's like, and the one person looked at the other guy and
boy.
said, with no turnovers. I'm just like, oh my god, they're like, this is hilarious. Like you're like, I
Yeah.
love how even they're like, oh my god, how is he not thrown an interception yet?
Yeah,
So
I think that producer's probably saying, "Now listen, guys, we're promoting this. You say nice things, okay?" And so probably an inside joke there is like, yeah, lead in with no turnovers. That would probably be it. The other thing that's interesting too is, you know, I want Cam Ward to do well. He just didn't look like he was basically ready for football at that level and that speed. And I bring that up because there's a little bit of a quarterback famine in the Big Ten, but I don't think that that's going to really be something that Wisconsin can make their bread and butter on by basically beating up on bad quarterbacks. Because guess what? They're part of the famine. They're not on the right side of that talent distribution. Future bet that I'm not so happy about: Liberty under 7.5 wins. Losing to UAB hurt, and more importantly, Charlie Brewer is not going to be able to come back. This new kid, Caden Slater or Salter, pardon me. He had a QB plus of 132, and he rushed for 79 yards. versus UAB. So that's the risk I think you take when you bet against a bad quarterback is, you know, he could get hurt or he could just lose his job. And in this case, this might be just something that pushes Liberty over 7.5. I'm going to do one do-over on my futures bets last week when I threw the North Carolina and Louisville bets to win the ACC in the trash bin. I'm going to go back in the bin and grab that North Carolina ticket because I want you to tell me 10 teams that have a better resume than North Carolina now.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean that the thing of it was people originally wrote them off after week one against App State, and they're like, "Oh no, they almost lost to App State." Well, I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh man, they beat App State." Now
Yeah.
it's like they beat App State, and again, I criticized them for that horrible play on special teams, and that was still really bad. But like, they might not be out of this. Like the
Oh,
ACC, like we're talking about Clemson having a problem. I think they are outgained in yards by Furman, which is insane, by the way.
yeah.
But like Clemson is down. Okay, Miami did struggle a little early to put away Southern Mississippi, but they did eventually put them away. So Miami is possible. Pittsburgh is going to kick around for a bit, but I have questions. I question the ceiling on them. App State isn't in the ACC, which would have been a problem for North Carolina. But
Yes.
no, I mean, there's not a lot of other like the
I mean, NC
ACC and
NC
maybe.
State looked very beatable against East Carolina.
I'm going against them this week. I'm picking.
Yeah,
I've already picked against them. I've already bet against them, but like at NC State isn't looking great. Um, yeah, Clemson is down. Syracuse
that's
possibly.
Syracuse.
Like
Yeah,
Syracuse is one of the like I think Syracuse, North Carolina, and Miami are like the only good teams in the ACC right now. So
it's like a classic Pac-12 when neither USC or Oregon is good, and it's just like, what on earth do we have here?
mhm.
It's just who knows what's going to happen. So yep, gonna grab that ticket out of the bin. So that's back in my hands. The We're gonna call it the head coach Scott Frost Memorial Hot Seat window, as he's done as a head coach.
Yeah,
Number one, obviously Jeff Collins. Number two, Brian Harsin. No surprise. Congratulations to Carl Durrell for your first mention on this at number three, and behind him, Will Healy of Charlotte. My man, you're in trouble, and I don't like what you're looking at this week either. So you might have a permanent spot on here.
yeah. I also want to add someone to the list. I also want to add a description to the list. The quote on the list is I thought we could put the game away. That was Scott Frost's quote about the onside kick against Northwestern. Um, but yeah, so the other person I want to add to the list is Kirk Ferentz of Iowa. Um, I'm going to talk a bit about Iowa later. But wow, just it's really bad. It is so bad, and I'm not
Yeah,
going to spoil the Iowa rant for later, but yeah, he needs to be on this list, and I think most of the staff at Iowa needs to be on this list as well. So yeah, I don't see him lasting this season. If what we
really.
saw, here's the thing: if what we saw last week continues, like how, like they've scored 14 points in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I just don't think he's fireable. I think that
What,
first of
what
all, he's
does
got
he?
a
What does he have? Blackmail on them?
I don't know. It's weird. It's like he's the governor there, and he's got some ridiculous contract too. So maybe I'll Google that and we'll figure that out for next week. I don't know.
Okay, well
That's
he should be like he should be
Oh,
on the
he
hot seat.
absolutely should. Yeah. No,
Like
he. But yeah, I feel
maybe
bad for the people of Iowa too.
maybe he's
You know,
untouchable, but like he really should be fired. So
he absolutely should. Yeah. Okay. So the Narduzzi window. This is just dedicated just to one person this week, Trev Alberts. We just saw how his ineptitude just affected Nebraska. He makes $800,000 a year, which is about 790,000 too much. Um, if you looked at Nebraska, the 2021 issues that they had in order were head coach, special teams, which is basically a function of the head coach because it's about discipline and attention to detail and that kind of stuff, and then defense. The problem, as I said in the preseason podcast, was not offense. Everything stemmed from the head coach. So what does Trev Albert say we need to do to fix the problems? He gets rid of the offensive staff. Great. Okay. Offense is still not the problem. Then he renegotiates the head coach's contract. Um, but then he brings the buyout date to October 1st, to when it drops by half. So it's like he didn't even look at the schedule. Now we can't say that anybody expected them to lose to Georgia Southern, But to not have it right after the Oklahoma game was just insipid, just stupid. And it's been kicked around a million times now that they paid an extra 7.5 million just to get rid of Scott Frost rather than wait 3 weeks. That's how toxic it was. That's just how bad it was. The 7.5 million is not a lot of money to Nebraska. They have Big Ten money. Um, and they have more money than most programs, obviously. Not of the top programs, but if you take all your programs in FBS, they're going to be in the top half by far. But what they don't have more than other programs like a Hawaii or a Bowling Green or a Ball State is time. This hurts, man. And time is the same cost to everybody, even more so like a program like Nebraska, where you haven't been a bowl game since like 2016. And just keeping him was such a big screw up that it's frustrating. And I don't really have any particular love or hate for Nebraska fans, but it just sucks for them that they have to basically toss a whole season and wait another season just to start a rebuild. Just absolutely inept. I mean, this guy is just totally out of his depth. And I think this makes Nebraska just a much less desirable job when you've got an AD who can't handle his stuff correctly. Or worse, he looks like an AD that can be taken advantage of by some sharp agent. So I think they're just going to overpay for an underqualified candidate. The one thing that's in their favor is in their footprint, in the remnants of the Big 12 are some very strong candidates that could fix it. I just don't know if he can pull it off and make things work considering how badly he's done as relates to football since he's been there.
It is a difficult spot. I mean, the thing is, again, we keep talking about the concept of super conferences, right? And Nebraska kind of accidentally, in some ways, ended up in one of the super conferences, right? Like when we eventually talk about the kind of
Yeah.
super conferences, the story is going to be like how some teams just kind of accidentally ended up in the super conference, like how Rutgers got in, or like how Nebraska ended up. Like, I mean, Nebraska's obviously was a national program decades ago, and I mean, they were probably going to be picked off anyway, either way. Like even if they had still stayed in the Big 12, and basically they may have actually at this time they may have actually been invited to the Big 10 along with, or maybe they even got an SEC invite with Texas and Oklahoma, or maybe they would have gotten a Big 10 invite with like USC or UCLA. Because again, it's a big market, big name brand team, right? So they probably would have been fine, but they are in one of the super conferences, right? And that does matter in this case, right? So if you're a head coach, and again, if you want a job that's going to pay you millions and millions of dollars in college football, it helps to be locked into a team that's getting $100 million a year in TV revenue. That helps.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the most unattractive. And the thing is, we talked about this before, right? Like they got the quarterback from Texas last year in the transfer portal, right? So it's not like they're not recruiting. Like they actually were able to take advantage of the transfer portal. And with Nebraska, it is a school with some money, right? Like they didn't care to pay the extra $7.5 million for 3 weeks, which again, I'm not exactly sure what the 3 weeks is going to get you. Like, do you think it's going to get you a spread cover against Oklahoma? Like, is that what this was for, to cover the spread against Oklahoma? Like, it's questionable as to exactly what the utility of this was, especially you're gonna have a brand new coach, and then like again, like okay, and the point you make about the lost season is so completely it's so completely important, right? Because it's like now actually I think they avoid Ohio State this year, right? But like because like that's the thing, right? It'd be like, okay, cool, you're our new interim coach, and like guess what? You're playing Oklahoma. You're playing a top 10 team
Mm-hmm.
in the school in the country your first week, and then you're also gonna play. Let's see who else they have.
It gets really tough at the end because I remember the whole thing about Nebraska about could they get to their 8 wins was, well, they need to because that last stretch is brutal.
Yeah, they
So
have
yeah,
Oklahoma, Indiana, Rutgers, then they got Purdue,
yeah.
Illinois, which is seeming okay. They got Minnesota, who
Here you go.
somehow,
Here,
yeah,
yes, the last four suck.
yeah, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, but then Iowa. Hey, that's looking better every day. Every
Is
day
it?
that game looks better. Well,
Well, yeah, Iowa can't score. Well, yeah, not to ruin that.
yeah, no,
Um,
that's the thing. But no, it's. I mean, they got Rutgers. That could be a really sneaky trap game. But like,
yeah, we talked about that. That's a Friday night game that we said, hey, it could
oh yeah,
happen.
anything. That's right. That is a Friday night game. Anything could happen in that game, October 7th. So, but no, it's yeah, just. I don't know what the utility of this was. Now, again, the schedule isn't as bad as it could have been, but like, yeah, it is in many ways a wasted season. Right now, I think they can eventually get back to competing in the Big Ten, but I I kind of think that they're they're in trouble. Like they're in trouble this year, but I think eventually they can find the right person and they can get back into it. But the thing of it is, though, like you make a good point about like they're not like Bowling Green or Hawaii, right? To have success in the Big Ten, you're going to have to start taking out teams like USC, Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, right? Like the difference if you get a good head coach and you're Hawaii or you're Bowling Green, guess what? Head coaching could get you a win and could get you a MAC championship, right? Like if you recruit basically the same talent level as the other MAC schools, you can get there. But you to knock off Ohio State, you've got to recruit at an elite level and be an elite head coach to do that. Because if not,
Yep.
they're going to just crush you. So like that, the talent gap in a coach, like the basically the plus EV of a coach in like Bowling Green, a good head coach in Bowling Green can get you probably to a MAC championship game, but a good head coach in Nebraska is not going to in the Big Ten is not going to get you there, right? So it's a tough task. But I think if they do it smartly, right? If they just randomly hire someone, like if what you're saying, like basically they overpay for an underqualified candidate, then yeah, that's a problem. But if they actually get out there and get the right candidate, I think this Nebraska team could eventually find its way to relevance again.
Well, and the thing too that just, about it's not just a wasted year. I think it's made things so toxic and just so it's taken it back so far that I think it's taken the next guy's job from a year one to a year zero situation where it's like, man, I've got to tear it down to the studs because this is really, really broken. Again, let's not forget this team. I think the total on them was 8 or 8.5 season win totals before
Hmm.
the season. What's it going to be next season? Like three?
Yeah.
I don't,
Well,
Um,
yeah.
and it's even tougher because one thing that we haven't talked about is Nebraska. Once they had been in the Big Ten for a while and they lost the effect of that pipeline of their natural recruiting base in the Big 12 footprint, they kind of don't have like a natural place to draw talent from. And you're seeing that where it's just, anybody they've had good has just kind of been from random places here and there. It's not going to be from in state. Talented guys are usually going to have to drive past 4 or 5 other Big Ten schools before they get to Nebraska. Um, it's making the rebuild for the next guy that's that much harder and longer.
Yeah, and that's a good point, right? I mean, you mentioned kind of, and there's been a couple of targeted head coaches for Nebraska. Lance Leopold is one of them. I think Matt Campbell from Iowa is another one. Probably a couple others. But the thing is, for Kansas, they're currently undefeated, right?
Yeah,
They're a currently undefeated team. They've got a Houston game this week, and which I mean for them is actually going to eventually be a Big Ten, a Big 12 conference game next year. But like, you're undefeated, like that guy's not going to want to give up on his kids, right? So like, what's he going to do? Leave mid-season to go coach them? No, it's going to be the end of the season. Okay, well, how's recruiting going to work? And like, okay, yeah, Lincoln Riley was able to grab a bunch of guys, drag them to the transfer portal, get them to USC. But
yeah,
like, that's a very special case because he was already basically coaching a top 25 team in the country.
yep,
Kansas, yeah, okay, maybe he can pick up a couple. He can drag a couple kids from Kansas with him. Um, Iowa State, they're really kind of down this year, so not loving the prospects there. So like the thing of it is now, like if and again, you make a good point about the fact that we like, why was the buyout October 1st? Like, why was it not just you're gone? Like, that's the question. Like, and if they
yes,
were gonna if they were gonna kick him out, basically fire him before the buyout hit, like he was the number one on pretty much everybody's hot seat board the entire offseason. Like for a reason, we all saw this coming a mile away. Like not a single person is surprised. The only thing we're surprised about is the timing. We thought that Nebraska was like poor or something. It was going to wait until like October 1st to fire him. That didn't happen. So I just don't understand why, like if they were going to spend the money anyway, why didn't they do this in May or like
yeah,
April or something, right? Then you have a guy in place. He's able to do something in his first year and recruit kids. Now you've got an interim head coach who is basically going to be a one and done. You have you got this offensive coordinator from Pitt last year, who's the offense has been pretty good, but is he going to stick around? If he's not the head coach, he's probably not sticking around. He's going to go somewhere else. He could get his own head coaching job, right? So you've got all these different issues on this, and it's really bad management of the program. And if they were
Yeah.
going to spend the money, like you just spend that money last year instead of this year. Like what did you actually save? You've burned this year, and you maybe burn next year too. So
Yeah. Yeah. My spiritual leader in the whole college football universe is Stephen Gottfried, and he said it best. He said, "If you think you can't afford to hire or to fire your coach, you definitely cannot afford to not fire him." It just there's just a point where it's inevitable, and it's just you're just making it worse, and they got every ounce of juice out of the let's see as bad as we can make it lemon. So great job, Trev Alberts. Okay. Last item on the executive dashboard, the G5 New Year's Bowl bid rankings. This is not who's the best G5 team. This who has the best path, I think, to getting that the New Year's Bowl bid.
oh,
Number
actually,
one's
the
oh
the
yes.
anti Narduzzi.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Please go
that's
ahead.
okay. No, so we're also gonna do we're gonna do the Narduzzi Award. And we're also gonna do the anti Narduzzi Award. So this week I'd actually like to give it to Sean Clark. He is the head coach of Appalachian State.
Yeah.
Honestly, they had a phenomenal week this week, and I watched a lot of that game. They just completely shut them down. And honestly, the fact that they only won by three is
A&M you're
actually
talking about. We got to be specific here just to be clear.
sorry. Oh, A&M, yeah, Texas A&M.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. No, they completely shut down Texas A&M, and honestly, the final score, I think it was 17-14. That's not
Mhm.
reflective of it because basically A&M got a late game punt return or no kickoff return touchdown. Basically, App State marched down the field, got a touchdown, they immediately gave it back on the ensuing kickoff, which is frustrating. But like it just showed like they were so bad on offense. That was the best play they had. Like all like they were dead on offense. Like that App State team completely controlled the game. Um, and even then, Texas A&M missed a field goal to tie the game, which is again just a shocking thing to say that they had to tie the game against App State. And then basically they missed that, and then App State marched down the field, and had they wanted to, either one kicked a game-winning field goal or just scored another touchdown. So they were in complete control of that game, just complete dominance. And yeah, this App State team is really good. I mean, they unfortunately lost to North Carolina. That was very sad. But like, man, just an amazing team, like just an amazing all-around effort to beat an A&M team that was way too hyped last week, and is probably way too hyped this week as well. But we'll talk about that later, I think.
Yeah. And that should not be an easy place to play. If you ever look at any games or especially YouTube videos where it's more extended look, what a crazy home field. It's just nuts that you know, I find it hard to believe that they should lose any games there at all, except for like when you're playing Alabama. But my gosh, yeah, I had to turn it to an Narduzzi thing. Let's be positive here. Great job, Sean Clark. Well done. Okay, G5 New Year's Bowl bid rankings. Number one, Cincinnati. I still think that they've got by far the best team in the American. Number two, Air Force. I just love what I'm seeing, and they just look like just a tough team. Three, I'm going to make a little generic. I'm just going to say if there's a one last Sun Belt East champ, I think it's them. I'm hoping there's some appreciation for just what a murderer's row that is, and I think if you've got App State winning last week, you had Old Dominion winning. You've had a lot of big wins out there that might at some point reach a critical mass of people saying, "Hey, really good division." So I put that, whatever champ comes out of there if they have one loss, number three spot. After that, Toledo. Before the season, I ripped on Jason Candle, but they have that defense that I think could take them a long way, and they might go 11-1. They might just have like the best unit on any either side of the ball in the MAC, and I could see them maybe going undefeated. Um, if Jason Candle just not do Jason Candle stuff. And then five, we talked about them, Fresno State. Obviously, I have them behind Air Force, but if they beat USC, they are on the grid and they have a great chance. And that loss against Oregon State is not just forgotten, but it all of a sudden becomes, hey, they played Oregon State down to the wire, and that was a good loss. And I think they've definitely got a shot. Okay, so the time for the deeper dive. This is about panic betting on injury news. The background is on Friday. BYU released some news that their receivers Puka Nakua and Gunnar Romney were out or they announced that they were out for the Baylor game. And I saw several quote sharp betters tweeting out, "Hey, bet Baylor now before the line moves. This is when you're supposed to, do it now." And that was just really insipid because basically it makes some really dumb assumptions. It assumes that number one, the news is not already baked into the line and it's going to move the line. It also assumes that any move is going to be material. It also assumes that the line before the injury was good and a sharp better wouldn't have basically been finding a lot of value on BYU in that case. So I bring this up because, my observation is that sharp bettors don't really try to front line or front run line changes by chasing injury news. You know, it could be built into the market to some degree already. Um, it's really tough to quantify exactly how much an injury is going to affect the final score, let alone the line, especially in college where there's a lot less known about each player. Um, you know, I also just think that the value in when it comes to injury news is lays a lot more in the market not really pricing the news correctly rather than just beating the market to whatever that change could be. So what was specifically wrong in this case with the BYU receivers news? Well, you know, it's kind of silly now, but Romney had already missed the prior game at South Florida, so there was some injury news that was on the horizon. It was not any surprise that he was already hurt. Nakua was injured during the South Florida game the prior week, and he was in a walking boot by the end of the game. So again, they knew something was up with him as well. It wasn't like this came out of nowhere. Um, so clearly the market had some kind of inkling that there was going to be some if there's going to be absence to injury, they'd probably baked something in already. Also, one thing that gets overlooked a lot is it's very different to have an injury before a game plan is put in place than if it's in during warmups and all of a sudden it's like, well, everything we practiced, we kind of have to go to plan B now. Very different. I think that some bettors just don't give coaches enough credit. You know, it's kind of silly to say, hey, I'm a bettor and I do this for fun, but I know better than head coach A that how important this receiver is, and they're not going to be able to get past it. I make fun of how bad a lot of coaches are, but they understand if I'm missing a key guy, I have to, do something else, work around that. Um, I find it really doubtful that anybody that was making a quick bet really had an understanding of the capabilities of the backup or the backups in this case, pardon me. And then I think even less likely is somebody that really understands the capabilities of the backups versus the starters can be objective because usually if you have that degree of knowledge, you're going to be a crazy fan who just can't be objective about what the line on your team should be and how much more you should like them than before because you're basically going to be, hey, I like my team, I always bet them or whatever. Um, Another thing that I'm sure that these people just didn't really consider was how proven is a coach and a program at their ability to recruit and develop in specific spots. I'd like to bring up when we did the Big Ten preview. I said, hey, I don't know who the next great receiver at Purdue is. They just lost David Bell, I think it was last year, but Jeff Brom's kind of at that point where he's proven he can recruit and develop and really bring in people and just plug them in and get a very productive receiver that's going to scare people. And BYU has actually proven that. I mean, last year they went past the loss of Zach Wilson with flying colors, and they really, they had a very good offense. Their problem last year was defense. So, how did this turn out in this case? Well, for starters, just for comparison, against South Florida, 12 different guys had receptions with a high of 4 catches and 41 yards. You know, so without their top 2 receivers against Baylor, a much better defense, Chase Roberts actually had 8 catches for 122 yards and a touchdown. BYU actually outgained Baylor by almost 80 yards and by 1.4 yards per play. So I think that basically, this shows that the market was really missing the point about how much better BYU's defense is going to be this year, which I mentioned in the preseason pod, versus what we saw last year. Um, so, I think that basically the quick reaction was just silly. I want to bring up another example too, real quick. Last year, Arizona's quarterbacks. This was year zero of the Jed Fish run at Arizona. He started the season with Gunnar Cruz at quarterback, who was a transfer from Washington State. He was horrible. He had a QB plus of 56. By the UCLA game, Jordan McLeod had learned enough of the offense to take over as starting quarterback, and he had a QB plus of 80, which is not great, but it was light years better than what Cruz was doing, and they could actually move the ball. But before the Colorado game, at the end of the UCLA game, McLeod was injured, and Cruz was put back at quarterback. And I think that the market didn't really understand the huge difference between the two. I think that they just said, "Hey, Jed Fish is kind of moving things along nicely," and they gave Arizona a credit that they shouldn't have, basically saying it's the program rather than the improvement at quarterback. So as a result, meanwhile at Colorado, Carl Durrell is just in a tailspin in Boulder, just running that program into the ground. So Arizona is only a 6-point dog, which was, their shortest price in over a month. Um, and what happens is if you just watched, 10 minutes of that game, you can see Arizona cannot move the ball at all. They lost 34-0. Now, is this an anecdotal evidence? Sure, but it's very emblematic of basically the market not really understanding the value of a backup. And so as relates to injury news, really what you got to do is just not be the first to market, but be the smartest in the market when it comes to the injury news and really what we can take out of that.
Yeah. So yeah, that is interesting, and yeah, I was on BYU, a little worried when you heard the injury news, but just kind of personally, I put a little less emphasis on receivers. Um,
Yep.
because last year there was a game. It was an NFL game though, so maybe some people will remember it more than others on listening to the podcast. But it was Arizona versus Green Bay, and Devontae Adams was out because of COVID. It was a Thursday night game, and I believe it was Arizona was a favorite. I think to start. I think they were like a 4 or a 5 point favorite, and then Devontae was ruled out. He was obviously Green Bay's number one receiver. Is now a Raider. He was ruled out, and then the line went to like 6, 6.5. And I was like, I just think Green Bay's a better team, and I bet Green Bay, and Green Bay did win the game relatively handily. It was still a close game. It was a one-score game, but they were the better team on the field, and it just goes to show you that, like, you know what? In today's game, you've got a lot of receivers that can catch the ball, and they can still spread the ball around the field.
Yeah.
It's like, even if you lose one of these guys, and again, that's Devontae Adams, arguably one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, they can recover from that. I think they're okay, right? Like, and that's the thing, right? So we're actually seeing this. This is an NFL thing right now, but one of the Chargers receivers, Keenan, I think it's Keenan Allen, he's out this week against the Chiefs on Thursday night, and that line has moved. That line was 3; it's now 4.5 in some places, and it's the exact same thing again, right? It's like, what is Justin Herbert not going to be able to throw the ball now because one of his wide receivers is gone? And this is the thing. Now again, depth is the more important thing. Chargers have a lot of wide receivers, right? This isn't like they're not throwing the ball to like only him, right? So there's other people to throw to, and they have some depth there. Now, it did hurt Baylor a little bit. They probably could have won that game in regulation time very easily with a field goal to cover the 2.5. But yeah, it's Baylor did cover the original spread, and actually they covered all the spreads. Actually, even the fours and the stuff. That's mostly because of overtime, but and and because they basically Baylor didn't get anything in the second overtime. But yeah, no, it's a lot of it is there's a lot of like people overreacting to some injury news. Like I kind of feel like injury to an offensive lineman is far more important than injury to a wide receiver because
Absolutely.
yeah, because
Yep.
the an offensive lineman going down directly affects the quarterback's ability to throw it to a wide receiver, but just one wide receiver down just affects the people who's going to be throwing to, right? So
Yep.
does it hurt them a little bit? Yeah, but like, and I saw this a lot with. You actually saw a good example is last year with the Cowboys when they were down. Some of their offensive linemen in injured games, they did a lot bad. They did a lot bad, a lot worse in those games. They were horrible in a lot of those games,
Yep.
losing as like 10-point favorites against the Broncos last year. And then you could see Dallas was going to be bad this year because they lost basically they had to give away their entire offensive line because of salary issues, right? And look at they didn't score a touch. They were the only team last weekend did not score a touchdown, right? So this is and they actually somehow got their quarterback injured, right? Like that's just how important offensive line play is. Like you tell me two members of an offensive line are down, I value that a lot more than some wide receivers missing or two wide receivers are missing. Because you have a lot more depth at wide receiver than you do at offensive line.
Yeah, now that you mentioned, I think one of a good rule of thumb might be, at least in college, to say how often do you see a true freshman start at this position? Because that'll basically inform at the end of the day what your depth is. How often do you see a true freshman start at left tackle? Not often. If unless he's like a 5 star, but just on an average program, it usually doesn't happen. And I think that would inform that losing your left tackle is a lot harder than just missing just like an outside linebacker whose just job is just to, a rush end who's just supposed to set the edge and get to the quarterback. If those are your two jobs, much easier. You're not directing traffic, or you're not
Mm-hmm.
having a key responsibility that just could explode the whole pipe, if you will, under the pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that might be the biggest thing is like, where do you see, and to your point exactly, back to the original point, too, about receiver. I think receiver is one of the positions where you see true freshmen play the most. If they can block, that's the one thing that keeps them. And running backs, it's like, running backs is like, he can't pass block. And for receivers, it's like he won't run block. And if they can run block, and they're, you can get on the field at some point pretty quickly as a freshman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, time for my deeper dive. So I'm going to do my
Okay.
deeper dive on the Iowa State Iowa game. So I did bet Iowa State in this game. I had Iowa State plus 3.5, and then money line. This game was a journey. So I came into the game a little late. I was watching some other games, and I was like, oh, I actually didn't realize the exact time this game was on. So I was like, oh, that game started already. So let me put it up in one of because I do a 6 box on my monitor. So I'm like, okay, let me get that into one of the boxes. So I came into the game. Iowa was already up 7-0. And I'm like, okay, that's okay. We're it's not. I'm not concerned about Iowa State putting this game away anytime soon.
Oh,
And
we're in the fourth quarter. They have 7 points already.
no, it was yeah, it was the first quarter, and I'm like, okay, a little concerned, but that's okay. Then I kept going back and forth between that game because I wasn't the most worried about that game, but like I kept seeing Iowa State driving down the field. I'm like, okay, good, they'll go tie the game up, and then I went away. And then all of a sudden it's like no, they're like the 30-yard line and come back like how is it still 7-0? And then it's like okay, well Iowa State's got the ball back again and they kept going down the field and then I kept looking at that game and it was still 7-0 and I'm like okay, this is getting a look at what's happening when they get into the red zone. And I mean he threw two interceptions and they had two fumbles or they had a fumble. So and I probably a missed field goal in there too or two. They had a lot. They had a lot. I know they did hit all the field goals. So they had some bad things happen. Eventually, they hit a field goal at about I think near mid to the second quarter, and then at a certain point, I'm like, is this just how this ends? Like, is this game just going to end 7-3 and Iowa is going to get the cover? And then eventually, sometime in the fourth quarter, Iowa State finally throws a touchdown. And at this point, again, Iowa State has double the passing yards and double the rushing yards of Iowa, somehow only winning the game by 3. But you know what? It doesn't matter. They were a dog anyway. Who cares? You're not alt spreading a dog when you're betting against Iowa. But this is the thing. So it's 10-7. It's raining. And so basically, I think I this at this point, all my other games in that window had finished. So like Texas A&M was done, Washington was done, Washington State, Wisconsin was done. So I'm like, sure, why not? Let's just put the audio on for this game. I can listen to this game for a bit, for the last couple minutes of it. So Iowa State gets the touchdown, and then basically Iowa gets the ball back, and they now have to go. They're down 3, and I think there was like, let me actually just check this here. They're down. They get the ball back with I think 38 seconds at their 41 uh yeah, they get the ball back with 38 seconds with at their 41-yard line. So like that's not bad. Like if in terms of like things to like get a field goal to tie the game, that's actually not bad at all. So, but it's going horribly. So actually no, so they're at their own 27-yard line. So they're not in bad shape. Sorry, the timing's off here on ESPN. So they're like somewhat deep in their zone, but they only need a field goal, right? So this is going horribly. So Spencer Petraeus, who's somehow still the quarterback for Iowa, keeps missing passes. Finally, they get a 14-yard pass, but then there's a bunch like he just couldn't get anything going. And at one point, and I had to laugh at this because at one point the commentator said something to the effect of like because usually at this point in the game commentators is like, oh, they got to get the ball to the number one wide receiver, or sometimes they're insane and say we got to run the ball, but like the commentator said something along the lines of like he's just got to get the ball into the air into traffic so that maybe they can get a penalty.
Oh,
And I'm like,
jeez.
how insane is it if their only viable strategy is to try to abuse game mechanics to get a first down? That's their only viable strategy to move the ball down the field, is to attempt, not even like successfully, just attempt to abuse game mechanics. That was Iowa's offensive game plan at the last drive of the game. That's how insane this was. I cannot believe that a Division One team in the Big Ten has scored 14 points in 2 weeks. It's mind-boggling. How is Spencer Petraeus still the quarterback? We highlighted all this last year. Somehow they got to the Big Ten championship game. We called them frauds. Somehow they covered +3 in a bowl game. Still no idea how that is. Um, Spencer Petraeus has actually regressed last week. I think he was like 11 for 20. Here he's 12 for 26. That's worse, for 92 yards and interception. It is really bad. Like I cannot believe that this team is still that he's still a quarterback for this team, and
Yeah,
that kind of
he
leads
should not be. Sorry,
and
go ahead.
yeah, well, that leads me into the next thing. So we're going to talk about a couple of games here in terms of spreads, and I'll lead off here with that one. Nevada +22 versus Iowa.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm betting. I do not care. I'm betting
Oh,
Nevada. Like,
no, you listen to your voice. You really care. You have passion in your voice.
I mean, here's why. Why? How is Iowa at 21 points? Can they score 21 points? I don't know. Like, it's 50-50 to score 21
Hmm.
points. I mean, I've said that now. I've probably cursed at this. A banner day for Spencer Petraeus running for 4 touchdowns. But no, like, I like they should not be 21-point favorites in Nevada. And I think the argument for it is that Nevada last week lost to a D2 team, Incarnate Word. Well,
Mhm.
actually, I looked at on the standings. Apparently, they have a coaches poll for FCS. I didn't actually know that before. But they actually do have a coaches poll for FCS. Incarnate Word is the eighth best. Is number eighth ranked in the FCS. South Dakota State, which Iowa actually played and only scored 7 points again, is actually the third ranked team in the FCS. So they actually both played decent FCS teams. Nevada beat New Mexico State. Iowa lost to Iowa State. This game should not be 21 points. This game should be a lot closer. Um, yeah, I'm
Did
taking.
you I want to point something out. Did
Yeah,
you see what your model has?
yes.
Yeah, it has Iowa at 4.6, which
That's
I
uncharacteristic of them. They should get a
usually
touchdown.
say that's like 2 field goals, but that's definitely 2 safeties.
That actually is two safeties, probably. Yeah, I can't like the model is like they're not even getting a touchdown. That's hilarious. But no, like the model hates them, which I mean I don't blame them. I don't blame you, model. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like I'm taking Nevada and the points, and I'm taking the money line too. Like this could be really bad.
Wow.
Like I know we've said horrible things about Nevada, and that's very fairly deserved. But like we could also say horrible things about Iowa too, and
And
like
we have,
we
yes.
actually I just spent 10 minutes doing that. But no, like it is really bad. Like I don't I don't know why they're 21-point favorites.
Yeah, I don't know how you model and you say, yeah, they'll get 3 touchdowns. That has to be just a complete, not just this is the price discovery game that we talk about. It's just like it's got to be an average of just wild, wild, wild differences
Like
with
how
somebody
is
saying, yeah, they're gonna, yeah, it's Nevada and they're terrible, so Iowa's gonna get 50 against them.
what is
And
the you know what? I'd love to see you talk about that. I'm gonna see what like the implied scores are. Let's see. Let's see what the scoring line has. So yeah, so it says Nevada over 7.5 plus 105. Iowa over 31, over under 31 points. What? They think Iowa's going to score 31 points against Nevada?
Um, you know, yeah, just by pace alone, they can't do that against anybody.
Yeah,
They, I
Incarnate
mean,
Word scored 40. Like, I don't.
yeah,
That's like this has to be they're protecting themselves. Like they think people are betting, and this line has actually moved towards Iowa too. Like this line started at 21, it's 23 now, so people are betting Iowa. God bless you if you're betting Iowa to cover 21 and a half. Yeah, it's just I'm watching this game. Sickos committee, if you're listening, make this the game of the week.
yeah.
Like just straight up, it has to be the game of the week. Something crazy is going to happen in this game, and I mean, like I think something crazy is going to happen in this game, and like Nevada will win. But like it could be like something crazy and Iowa could win, but like they're gonna win by like some stupid score of like 15-12. It's gonna be some really dumb. We're like, how did that
Yes.
even happen? But like, I'll take 21 points then in that case though.
Okay.
So yeah.
Leading strong. I like that. Nevada and Iowa. Well done. I'm gonna go with Miami at Texas A&M. I think that's at 6 now. Does that sound right?
I've got 5.5 on my book, but
Okay.
I grabbed 6 already. So
Okay. Yeah, I had got 5 on that as well. We talked about A&M was just pathetic against App State, under 5 yards per rush attempt, um, under 5 yards per pass attempt, which is really, really embarrassing against a Sun Belt team. I don't know how they're in the top 25 still. That's just ridiculous. They still have a good defense, but I think they're going to be punting all day long. Not that Miami's defense is elite, but Miami's defense is definitely competent, and they're going to be tougher than App State. Tyler Van Dyke's QB plus so far is 123 this season, which is in line with what he had last season. Um, so I think they're just going to be running the ball more and just running, just wearing down the A&M defense. They ran for 190 yards. Miami did, but on 43 called rushes. So against Southern Miss, that's not great. That's just Mario doing Mario things and saying, I'm going to run the ball no matter what. Now, maybe he was doing that in preparation for this game. I don't know. Let's see. Um, I'm a little concerned that they gave up QB plus of 92 to Southern Miss team that has really serious problems at quarterback, and Southern Miss couldn't run it all. So maybe they're a little susceptible to the pass. The good news is if you're Miami is that A&M doesn't have a competent quarterback like ever now. So I took Miami. I'm going to grab a money line and might look at the under 48 as well. I could see this being a Texas state of Texas version of Iowa and Nevada.
that over under 45 now, so it's already fallen 3 points, a
Oof.
whole field goal.
Okay.
So I think other people are thinking that same. I mean, the App State Texas A&M game was 60. That over under was 60 points, and that nowhere near
Yeah.
barely 30. And that was 17-14, just over 30. But yeah, that game, the under in that game hit. But yeah, it was kind of weird when you see it at like when App State and North Carolina score almost the highest point total in a college football game ever, and the next week they score the teams combined score under 30. It's kind of crazy. But yeah. All right, my next one, I'm gonna take the UTSA Roadrunners versus Texas. You at the time you're getting 13 and a half. It's down to 12 and a half now. This is literally the ultimate letdown game. In the future, when eventually there's going to be a textbook about betting, there's going to be this game, and it's going to be in terms of like here's the definition of letdown game. It's going to be this game. Like you could see this coming a mile away. Texas played like probably a ceiling game against Alabama. Like literally,
Hmm.
that was the best Texas has played in what 2-3 seasons since what? Since they were competitive with actually they did this 2 years ago in 2020. Remember they were actually competitive with that LSU team with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. They were competitive with that team until late, and they eventually lost that game. That wasn't even with Steve Sarkisian. That was actually with Tom Herman.
Yeah.
So and then that season was very forgettable. I think they made a bowl that season, but barely. No, UTSA is actually a pretty good team. They lost week one against Houston. They took down an Army team, which is actually pretty good too. But again, that was maximum effort. That was Texas's ceiling easily Texas's ceiling. And the one thing that got me was I was listening to that game and they said that Sarkeesian said to said to his players, he'd be like, "Oh, don't we can't disappoint Nick Saban." In playing, which is a great inspirational thing to say. He's like, don't disappoint me, don't disappoint our opponent. Like, don't make us look bad against one of the greatest coaches of all time, which is hilarious. But like, if you get up that much for that game, what do you have the next week against a team?
Yeah.
And again, the other thing is the fact that UTSA. I'm not sure if everybody knows what the acronym is for UTSA. It's Texas San Antonio. It's actually a Texas team. So again, this is maybe not for Texas an in-state rivalry, but this is actually a rivalry for them. And again, when you're in Texas, you all hate Texas, right? You all hate the University of Texas. So
Hmm.
if you're UTSA and you're actually a good team, you finally get your crack at Big Brother. And Big Brother just played a hell of a game against Alabama. And you get to take it, like, you get to say, hey, we just beat the team that almost beat Alabama. And Texas is recovering. Quinn Ewers is out for a couple more weeks. He's probably going to be back for Oklahoma, Texas, but he's going to be out. He's out. He's got Hudson Card is in. Hudson Card was limping last week, so questions about how strong he will be. But yeah, I just that Texas played out of their mind. And to be fair, Alabama also played very badly too. Like Bryce Young is normally a lot better. I still have concerns about Bryce Young. I don't think he's going to win the Heisman this year, and I have questions about
Yeah.
him going forward in the NFL. Like it's weird. Some weeks he'll be amazing. He'll throw for like 5 touchdowns and like 400 yards, and then other weeks he'll do what he did against Texas, which is what we saw last week. And it's really weird and it's really Jekyll and Hyde. And I suspect it's based off of pressure. My model is actually somewhat good at sensing that out. If you're an offensive line that's able to get pressure on him, like kind of like Georgia was in the national championship game, you can shut him down. Which again, I have a lot of questions about when you get to the NFL when all of a sudden you've got veteran pass rushers coming right at you. I have concerns that he's not going to transition well to the NFL. But again, that's a conversation for another day and possibly another whole podcast. But yeah, I'm I'm taking UTSA here. I think this is a great opportunity for them to show up Texas, and I think like we've seen this so many times from Texas. We've seen Texas play at a high level in one game and then immediately get let down the next. Right? We saw this even last year with Cesar Sarkisian's team when Texas almost beat Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry. They basically they lost. They didn't even cover the spread because Oklahoma got a late touchdown. But like they were leading. They were up 21 points in that game at some points, and then the next week they lost to someone. I can't remember who it was, but they definitely lost to someone. Because I remember them like then they immediately lost like the next 6 games or something, which was insane.
Yeah.
And like I think this is the ultimate letdown spot. I'm putting it with here with UTSA. I'm not thinking about it twice. I've got my Roadrunners. We're good. Let's see what we can do this week with them.
Yep. You don't think that Sark's going to tell him don't embarrass Jeff Traylor, the UTSA coach? Yeah, I'm with you on that. I agree. I'm not going to bet it, but I definitely agree with your whole rationale there. My next game is BYU at Oregon. BYU getting, I think it's still 4.
Three and a
Um,
half.
okay, yeah, I grabbed 4.
Me too.
We went over the whole wide receiver situation at BYU and how they managed around it, and they had a pretty solid game passing last week against Baylor, who's a very good defense and with a brilliant defensive coach. What I really like about this matchup is BYU last week held Blake Shapen to under 5 yards per pass attempt and a QB plus of 47. Um, or sorry, they're giving up a QB plus 47 this season. Interestingly, they've played both quarterbacks from Baylor's Big 12 title team last year. They played South Florida and Gary Bohannon the week before. So two good quarterbacks and really held them in check. And kind of going with that whole dynamic that we liked about Wisconsin hosting Washington State and the matchup of a defensive coordinator going against Graham Mertz. I love this BYU defense that's shown that it knows how to outsmart quarterbacks going against Bo Nix. Bo Nix is by far the worst quarterback that they've have faced so far. Moreover, this is just a coaching mismatch. I'm not going to revisit the whole thing about just how horrible Oregon's coaching staff is, but Satake has proven himself. His team's on both sides of the ball, after losing talent too against, I think, best case an Oregon coach who's still learning how it's going to be, but he's definitely not there yet. So I like this one plus the points and money line.
Yeah, I completely agree. The only thing is that like, people are gonna be like, "Oh, but Bo Nix went 28 for 33 against Eastern Washington last week." But no, he had 5 TDs, which is kind of insane. But no, yeah, it's a complete coaching mismatch. I think BYU gets back one or two of their receivers this week. So yeah, no, I'm taking BYU in the points. The thing is, BYU is this team again. They are still an independent until next year. They have a habit of just going into these teams in some of the top teams in each conference and just crushing them. And like I mean BYU wasn't a crush last it wasn't a crush last week, but like they've taken down people before, and they have a very specific love of beating Pac-12 teams, because they want to be in the Pac-12, but the Pac-12 wouldn't let them. So they just keep like wrecking the Pac-12, and they only got a couple more opportunities to do it until they're part of the Big 12. So yeah, they're gonna like I don't understand why Oregon's favorite here. Honestly, I don't understand.
Yeah,
I've got BYU. No, I do have BYU as a 3 point favorite, so smaller. But again, if I'm getting four, I'll still
yeah.
take that anyways, right? Like I mean, even if BYU just covers here, but yeah, no, I still now again the other thing is the fact that my model isn't really able to account last week's because I no Eastern Washington is D1, I think, right? Yeah, Eastern Washington's D1.
No, no, they're FCS.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, so then
Yeah.
that game isn't fully priced into the model then. But no, it's yeah. I just don't understand why Oregon is favored here. I think BYU should be favored. And again, we saw this last week, right? The -2.5. That kind of well, I mean that was about the fair spread of the game, but like BYU just still feels like it's being definitely undervalued in the betting markets, and this team is better than last year's team. So yeah, I'll take that mismatch, I think. And then my last one, this was kind of a tight one for me. I could have gone either way with this one. It was either Texas Tech plus 10, or that line's bounce around a bit. I got it at 10.5. It's 10 now. Texas Tech against NC State, and then also Kansas versus Houston. I think Kansas is also 10, getting 10 against Houston. Kind of like both dogs. Texas Tech seems legit. Like they took down Houston last week, which is a team I also kind of think is pretty legit too. But NC State, they struggled against Eastern Carolina. Like they could have lost that game. Eastern Carolina put away Old Dominion, who's actually pretty good because they took down Virginia Tech and looked competitive with Eastern Carolina. So I I think this NC State team might be a little overrated, and I think Texas Tech might be a little underrated. And again, the same kind of thing as Kansas. We picked Kansas last week because we wanted to fade West Virginia because we were like, okay, it's kind of crazy how this like reverse fade has come in because like we wanted to fade Pitt, so we bet West Virginia, and then we're like, okay, we want to bet West Virginia, so we're gonna bet Kansas, and then now we're gonna bet Kansas because like I think this Kansas team's actually pretty legit. Like this
Yeah.
Lance Leopold is a really good coach. This Kansas team believes in themselves, and yeah, okay, their defense isn't great, but their offense is actually pretty good. I don't like last week the 14.5 was offensive, and they eventually won in overtime. Which again, I had the 14.5, so I'm sitting in overtime being like, cool, no matter what happens, I win this. But then they actually won the game. So no, I love give me the Jayhawks. They're a fun team to watch. Lance Leopold has completely turned this program around. Last year they were horrible. This year, like what is the spread versus them at Texas going to be? It's not going to be like 28 points again. It's going to be like
Mm-mm.
what, like 10, maybe 10. Like Kansas could. I mean, well, let's see what happens in the next couple of weeks. But like, there's a chance that like this that could actually be a like. I mean, last year it was a competitive game too, but like, there's a chance it could actually be like a game in which there's a fairly even betting line there.
Yeah, I wonder where that game is. Yeah, I think Kansas is kind of with, you know, very low double digits against everybody that's not basically Oklahoma or Texas at this point.
Pretty much, yeah.
Maybe Oklahoma State. I would push back a little bit on Texas Tech only because the quarterback situation. Um, that, like I said, Donovan Smith, his QB plus is pretty low, and that might just be a problem with that Houston defense. But other than that, yeah, I'm with you.
All right, sounds good. Any other lines you want to talk about, or I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we've covered enough.
Yeah, that's enough. All right. Well, it's the thing is, I actually looking at the lines, or not looking at the lines, looking at the schedule ahead. I didn't think it was going to be that good, but then I see the lines, and now There's actually quite a lot of fun games this week. A lot of the ones we pointed out, there's actually some really fun games. A lot more games in the 1 o'clock window. Last week there was like four, I think. Now there's a lot more this week. So yeah, it's gonna be hopefully a lot more even of a Saturday. But yeah, I'm looking forward to another great Saturday of college football, and we'll be back here again next week to recap last week and talk about week four. Yeah, let's I don't know which is there one team we're really on this week? What's one team we're both on this week? BYU, I
Let's see.
guess.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
okay.
Miami.
Miami, yeah, we got a lot. Like we got a lot of small dogs this week. Well, some big dogs, but then some
Yeah.
also smaller dogs. So yeah, I kind of like the position we're in. So yeah, go Cougars and Hurricanes. Call that even. All right, see you guys. See you next week.